Hey everybody, it's Al with BobCAD. This is the next episode of our webinar series. Today's topic is going to be Getting Started CAD. As you know, I'm the voice of the AfterDark video series. You can find me on Instagram, Al DePoalo, or you can find me on Facebook, BobCAD After Dark, and on YouTube. In this webinar, we're going to cover many of the common features any new user should know how to set up and navigate BobCAD's environment. Okay? The topics we're going to talk about is screen layout, toolbars, viewing options, selection, layers, colors, dimensions, the user coordinate system, editing geometry, surfaces and solids, the CAD history tree. Mainly this is going to be about the drawing environment, the toolbars, and the common tools that you use on a regular basis when importing, editing, or designing parts in BobCAD. We're going to talk about dotted lines, how to convert solid lines to dotted lines, how to measure, inspect, use dimensions, snap points, the UCS, plane creation, move, rotate, edit, common editing features. Now, as always, to learn more about the latest in cutting-edge CNC programming technology, call us today, 877-262-2231, extension 123. You can set up a personalized one-on-one demonstration, or you can always download a demo at BobCAD.com. All right, so let's get started here in the software. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the screen layout. Now, as a longtime BobCAD user myself, there's a very particular screen layout that I like to have. I like to have my measure entity window over here. I like my layer UCS post manager over here. And then I have my data CAD-CAM tree and BobArt window on the left. This is the layout that I find to be best for me for my workflow when I'm working in the BobCAD environment. So to kind of talk about this, these main toolbars, there's three of them. There's the data CAM tree manager, the measure entity, and the layer UCS post manager. These toolbars are dockable. When you first install the software, they're all listed on the left side of the screen, and depending on your screen resolution, they may overlap each other. So that's one of the reasons why I move the measure entity and the layer UCS post manager off to the right. Now, if you have 2 monitors or 3 monitors, you can detach these as well and move them to a separate screen. Many users do that as well to unlock more CAD window space. Now, you also can pin these toolbars. There's this little like thumb pin. You can pin them to the side and that will make them go away, and then when you move your mouse over it, it'll fly back out, and then you can pin them back out. All right, so you can move these toolbars. Now, one of the other things that you can do as well is, something that comes up when the software is first installed, all the toolbars are turned on. So how do you turn toolbars off, and how do you turn them back on? So if you go over any toolbar and you right click, you'll get a list of all the toolbars that are available. You can see I have a lot of them turned off. Okay, if you want to turn one on, you just click on that toolbar and that toolbar will come up. It will be made available. Okay, so you can go to the blue bar here and right click and do the same thing. All right. Or you can go to a toolbar itself and right click, and you can add in a lot of these different toolbars where you can turn them off. Now, I am under the opinion that less is better. All of these functions, that all the toolbars that we have, you have available through a menu, so you can go to the menu. You have available through one of the toolbars and the different icons for the different features. And then you also have a right mouse function that has many of the common CAD features. So whether you want to use your mouse, you want to use a toolbar, or if you want to use a menu, you have access to all those options. Okay, what I recommend is those tools that you use most often, you put on the toolbars. And if it's not something you use all the time, then why have it open and available? Now, one of the other things is, where can you dock these toolbars? Well, you can dock them on the top of the screen. You can dock them on the left side of the screen. You can dock them on the right side of the screen, and you can even dock them on the bottom of the screen. So depending on your particular preference and workflow, you can dock these where it best suits your needs. And I do recommend that you customize the interface so that it works for you. Now, so you can turn toolbars on and off by right-clicking on any toolbar and going to one of the check boxes, or you can go to the main blue bar and do the same thing. Okay, so you can turn toolbars on and off that way. Now you can move toolbars by clicking on the toolbar and then dragging it into position. You'll also notice that once it's in a position, there's these dots available. So in order to move it from around in that area, you click where those dots are, and that will let you drag it around. Okay. Now the other thing you can do is you can also change your toolbars, and what I mean by that is there's all these different options that are on the toolbars, so you can change them and you can customize them. So what I mean by that is you can go to Preferences and then Customize. All right. When you go to Customize, this will show you a list of all the different commands, and you can find one from here and you can drag it onto a toolbar. That's one way you can do it, but you can also drag one from one toolbar to the next toolbar as well. So this way you can consolidate and have one toolbar that has 3 or 4 options that you may need, or you can remove options that you may not use. Okay, so again, just another level of customization, and it is something that I do recommend you get familiar with and work with. Okay, so now the last question that I want to cover about the screen layout is saving the screen layout. So you make your changes to the software, you close the software down, you open it back up. Will those changes be there? And the answer is yes, if you can if you save your file. So when you first open the software, before you open any other files, you go ahead and you make all your adjustments, then you save the file, close the software, open the software back up, and that will save your screen set. Okay, so until we incorporate user profiles, that's the methodology that you use. When you save, it will save your screen set. So before I move on to the next group, if there are any questions about this, just go ahead and raise your hand. If you have any questions about the screen layout, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, I'll give it just a second longer, and it looks like nobody has any questions. Okay, good. All right, the next thing we're going to go to is the viewing options. So anytime you're in the CAD software, a big part of what you need to do is to view. Whether you opened a file or you've drawn a file, you may need to change where you're looking at or what you're looking at. So you do that with your different viewing options. So, and by the way, any questions that you have, no matter what it's about, if you have a question about this webinar topic, go ahead and just type in the questions. I'll get to it at the end of the webinar, so any question is definitely worth it. So go ahead and throw it out there. Feel free, anything that comes up. All right, so we're talking about viewing options, and again, this is getting started. These are basic features. Some of them you may know already, some of them you may not know. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the mouse wheel. Okay, you do have some keyboard functions. We use Control, we use Shift. Those are some of the functions that we use on the keyboard. When it comes to the mouse, we use the center mouse, we use the left mouse, and the right mouse. So the first thing I want to talk about is the mouse wheel. As you roll in and out with the mouse wheel, it will zoom in and out. You can also use plus and minus on your keyboard to zoom in and out as well. Okay, if I go to this other file over here and I want to zoom in and out, I can do so with my mouse wheel. If I move my mouse wheel to a specific section of the drawing and I zoom into it, you'll notice that it does zoom to cursor. Okay, so it's going to zoom to where the cursor is. Okay, if I roll out, I can roll in, I can roll out. Okay, so that's one part of viewing. has to do with your mouse wheel rolling in and out. The other one is when we're talking about panning. So panning, we use control and then you smash the mouse wheel or you press the mouse wheel down. And this will give you a pan option. So you can pan, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan, you can zoom in, you can zoom out. Okay, so we have zooming, we have panning. The other one is a window view. So if you hit control and drag a window, this will give you a window zoom. So you can zoom in, roll out, pan, okay, roll out, window zoom, zoom in, zoom out, okay? So those are some of the basic functions. The other one would be, let's say, so we have pan, zoom. Okay, the other one is just to press the mouse wheel. Okay, to press the mouse wheel will give you a rotate, so you can rotate the part in 3D, okay? You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan, and you can rotate the part. Okay, now once you get out of a top view rotation, you can use Control 1 to get back into a top view. If you want to get to a front view, you can use Control 2. Side views, all the controls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 will get you to the different views. So that's a quick way to get back to a top view. Generally, I like to be in a top view most of the time. And I orientate my work when I do the my setup. My first setup is always normal to the top view. It's just something that I do all the time. Okay, so zoom in and out. We have pan, we have window zoom, we have rotate, and then we have our top view, which is Control 1. Now, I'm going to pull this toolbar down to bring attention to it. You'll notice that this does have all the viewing options. So you have view all, you have window, you have pan, and you have rotate. Okay, so they're available from the toolbar. I don't think you have that from the right mouse button. Okay, so it's going to be either the toolbar, the mouse, or if you go to the view menu, there's also a lot of options in here as well. And you'll notice that there are the hotkeys are shown as well. So you can see the different hotkeys for the different options for viewing. Okay, so those are some of the basic viewing options. Again, if you don't want to use the Control 1, you can use this open box icon, and that will also show you the number, all the different views, top or front or back. Okay, so that is the options that we have for viewing for both the mouse, the toolbar, and the menu. Before I move on to the next group of options, are there any particular questions that come up? And it looks like there is a question in here. Is it possible to change the function of the mouse buttons to use other design software? We want the same mouse button settings. That's a good question. I don't think there is much customization of the mouse buttons itself. As far as the configuration within BobCAD, you can use Windows to configure, I believe, to switch like left mouse button to right mouse button. The other option that is supported within the software is a 3D connection mouse. There's a lower model and a higher model one that's supported, and that will help with your viewing. And it also, you can program the buttons on the 3D mouse. So if you're looking for a little more functionality, the 3D mice or 3D mouse from 3D Connection is supported, and you can customize from there. So hopefully that answers your question on that. Is there any other questions that we have about viewing before we move on? If you have a question about viewing, raise your hand. Okay, it does not look like we have any questions about viewing, so we're going to move on to the next part of, or the next topic, and this topic is going to be selection. Okay, so we talked about screen layout, we talked about viewing options, now we're talking about selection. So selection is a big part of the design software and for the manufacturing side as well. Whether you're selecting holes to drill or selecting geometry to edit or move, selection is really big. So when we look at this, when you're in the CAD environment, you are not in selection mode, so you're not able to select anything, okay? if you're not in a function, and a function would be, you know, maybe one of the 35 different editing tools that we have that's found under utilities, or maybe one of the other drawing features like sketching a radius on the screen. If you're not in one of those options, when it comes to selection, you have to put yourself in selection, okay? So there is a selection function here. There's a toolbar dedicated to selection. There's a black arrow. When you put yourself in selection, you'll see the button is depressed and your mouse icon, your pointer changes. So it goes from just a white pointer to a white and gray pointer that is slightly larger. So that's how you know you're in and out of selection, okay? You can put yourself in selection by clicking on selection. You can get yourself out of selection by escaping. One of the things about the BobCAD software is the functions are modal, or most of them are modal, meaning they stay in a feature or a function until you cancel out of it or you select another feature or function. So it's important to know how to get out of them, and there's a number of ways that you can do that. Right now I'm in selection. If I want to get out of it, I hit escape. That gets me out of it, okay? If I'm in selection and I want to get out of it, I can right click and choose cancel. That's another way to get out of it. If I'm in selection or any function and you want to get out of it, there's also this check OK, and there's also this red X cancel. So you can use that to get out of a function as well. All right. So if you're not in a function and you want to put yourself in selection mode, well, I guess the question would be, if you're not in a function, you're not moving, you're not drawing something, why would you want to put yourself in selection mode? Does anybody have any ideas? Go ahead, raise your hand if you have an idea. Anybody? All right, doesn't look like it. Okay, so if you are in the CAD and you want to put yourself in selection mode and you're not in a function, the reason would be to do a couple of different things, but mainly to change the attributes, to change the geometry, whether it's the color, the layer, the size, something like that. But that's mainly what it's used for, is so that you can change something about the geometry. So let's talk about selection. Whether you're in selection in the CAD environment or you're in the selection from the machining environment, when you go to select geometry, the way that it works is the same. Once you're in selection mode, one of the ways you can select is a window pick. And a window pick, you just draw a box around the geometry, okay? Now, in BobCAD, it doesn't matter whether you do left to right selection or right to left selection, and this is very important. Some CAD systems, if you do left to right selection, it will select only the geometry that's wholly inside of the window, and if you do left or right to left selection, then it will select whatever is inside of the window, even if it's partial geometry. With BobCAD, it doesn't matter. Right to left, left to right. If you draw a window, anything that touches inside of that window will be part of the selection, okay? All right, so we have window selection. Another selection we have is chain selecting. So if I wanted to select all the way around this outside edge here, okay, instead of window selecting where I'm getting other geometry, okay, what I would use is chain selecting. And chain selecting is when you hold down Shift and you left click on the geometry. And if the geometry is connected, if it's contiguous, there's no breaks in it, then it will select as a chain. So, and as you can see, instead of selecting one of these at a time, 1, 2, 3, going all the way around, this can be very laborsome. I see a lot of new users doing this, okay? So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is hold down Shift and left click, and that will get you a chain selection, okay? So you have window selection and you have chain selection, okay? Another selection that you have for when you're doing machining, pockets and things like that, or setting the depths of your 2D routines, or setting your levels for 3D machines, 3D machining would be, picking a surface edge. And that could be just left clicking on a surface edge, or you'll also find that if you right click, it will give you some options as well. So keep that in mind for selection, all right? So we have window selection, we have chain selecting. I also want to talk about selection modes here. By default, BobCAD is in the add remove mode. So add remove means you select it one time, it adds it. You select it another time, it removes it. This is really a good feature because you can window select a group of entities and then deselect what you want. You're not limited to just add remove. You could do just add to selection, and you can do just remove from selection. You'll find the default is add remove, and that's probably the most versatile, most common one that people use. Okay? All right. Let's see here. The next thing that I want to talk about is some of the other modes that we have for selection. We have pick and match by color, pick and match by layer, pick and match by radius or line style. Basically what this lets you do is you can go into selection, and if you have geometry that is different colors or on different layers or a specific radius size or a line style, you can click on one and it will select all the other geometry that's the same. So pick and match. As an example, if we choose pick and match by radius and then we click on one of these radiuses, all the radiuses that are that size were selected. Okay, if we do pick and match by color, we don't have any different colors set up or any different layers set up, but the process would be the same. Now, the thing to keep in mind about pick and match is pick and match is a modal function, so it will stay in that function. So you need to click out of it so that you don't stay in pick and match by radius. And sometimes that happens. You'll go to a pick and match mode, and you're in that mode, you don't realize it, and you try to select other things, and it doesn't work out for you so well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So we have pick and match methods. Okay, we also have select all, we have select by color, and we have select by layer. And those are probably some of the more common ones, putting geometry as certain colors or putting geometry on certain layers as part of the CAD preparation steps to make it easier when you go to do the machining, where you can pick from a color or pick from a layer to pick up a boundary or the surfaces you want to cut or the holes you want to drill. Okay, so that is something that you would want to consider there. All right, so those are the selection options we have available for you. You have window selection, chain selection, pick and match selection, select all, cancel your selection, select by color, select by layer. Are there any questions about that? If there's any questions, go ahead and raise your hand or add a question into the question box. All right, here we go. We got some good questions. We have, is there a selection mask function? And actually, there is a selection mask function. Okay, so when we go into selection, you're going to notice that this toolbar here that is grayed out, all of a sudden becomes available. Okay, and this is your selection mask. You can see it right here. The selection mask, if you're not familiar with, that is a tool to allow you to limit what geometry is considered in the selection. Okay, and the way that it works is really simple. When you put yourself in selection mode, all of these entity types are available for selection. So if I window pick, you'll see that all of the lines and arcs get selected. Okay, if I put myself in selection mode and I turn off all the options, so now no geometry would be selected, but I could say maybe just select the arcs, and I can window pick, and now only the arcs would be selected. Okay, so selection mask is actually a very powerful tool for cleaning up geometry, or if you have surfaces and layers, or you want to just grab the points and things like that. Very easy to use, and you can turn selection mask on or off as necessary. So great question there. Let's see. Is there an easy way to select a single entity if two entities overlap? For example, selecting a short line segment that is collinear with a long segment where the short segment is entirely within the long segment. That's another great question. Okay, so what we're talking about there is we have a line, and then we have another line that's on top of it. Okay, in this example, I believe what he's saying is, and it's a little bit difficult to do this. So let me take this one here. I'm gonna edit, cut. I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to trim that one out, and then I'll do edit, paste. So what we have here is we actually have two entities. We have one line here, and then we also have the other smaller segment that's inside of it. And the question is there an easy way to select a single entity? Well, the way that this works here is you know, if I chain this up here, let me just kind of draw a chain around this, and I'll trim these together. This is a big reason why you choose chain selection versus window selection. Okay, so there's no way for me to select really just that entity there if I didn't know it was there. Okay, there's just no way for me to really do that. There's no tools within the software for that. There are some tools to reorganize and erase doubles, but those tools are when the endpoints are at the same position. Okay, so the way that you eliminate when you go to profile or go to pocket to have that smaller entity become an issue is you don't choose window selection, because window selection will get all of the geometry in there. Okay, Brock? What you would do instead is you would do chain selecting. So you would do shift, left click. Now that has that chain. What I would generally do from there is to move that geometry to its own layer. Okay, then I can turn that layer off, and that will show me that there was other geometry underneath it. So instead of using window selection, use chain selection for your chains, and it will eliminate the problems that you get with window selection or color selection on profiles for profiling and pocketing. So hopefully that answers your question there. Okay, we got another question here. When trying chain selecting, or when trying chain select, sometimes it won't pick the whole path. Assume that means the segments aren't contiguous. Is there a tool to show if the entity is contiguous, and if not, where the break is? Okay, so that's another great question. You could do a chain select here, okay, and if it doesn't go all the way around, John, you know that there's a break there, okay? There isn't a tool where you window pick it and it turns a different color or anything like that. Really, all you do is you go to selection mode, you shift click, okay, and wherever it stops, if it stops right here, and what I'll do here is I'll just, sometimes this could be because of, there's a lot of different reasons of why this could be, but usually there's little breaks like this. See this little break here? That's generally what it is. Sometimes it's arcs with smaller segments like non-tangent segments, or when they didn't trim the geometry together. So if I do a chain select on here, you can see that it didn't go all the way around. Okay, so what I do, John, is I zoom in and I look at this section here. Is that contiguous? Or I zoom in here and I look at this section here. Is that contiguous? Okay, or is that trimmed? Or is that tangent? Or is there extra geometry there? At that point, I'll trim it up. I'll trim these two together, or I'll even come over to this side and trim those two together. I'll chain select again. If it goes all the way through, I know I found my break. If it stops in another position, generally that's an indication of double entities, so I'll do a clean up and optimize or erase doubles. But generally, wherever it stops, I'm going to go and look in that area, and that's where I'm going to find the break. So hopefully that answers your question, John. Great questions, guys. Thank you so much for sharing with us. If there isn't anything else, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic. All right, so the next topic is going to be changing attributes, okay? So changing attributes is changing the color, changing the line style, changing the layer, okay? So for me, I use layers. Layers are like pieces of paper. I find them extremely helpful to sort out your geometry and to kind of, I actually probably overuse layers. It's just a habit that I've gotten into where I just overuse layers, okay? So Steve, the layers are right over here in the Layer UCS Post Manager, okay? And in these layers, UCS and posting, in these options here, these windows are right mouse functions. So you right click and it gives you the options, okay? If you're in UCS, right click, it gives you the options. If you're in posting, right click, it gives you the options. That's also the same for the CAM tree. I guess not so much data entry. It's the same for the CAD tree, and then it's also the same for the BobArt tree. The measure window, there's no right click function. Okay, so in the layer window here, right, what you would do is you would right click, and this is where you can add a new layer. So what we want to talk about is changing attributes. That's the topic. So modifying the color of the geometry, modifying the layer that the geometry is on, modifying maybe the radius size or the length of the line or the line style. Okay, so this can be done two different ways. The first thing that has to happen is you have to select the geometry. So I'm going to window pick these holes here. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is this toolbar right here is the miscellaneous toolbar, and when geometry is selected, different options turn on. Okay, so there's this one, and this one. And then there's also these down here. So if you hover over it, it will tell you what they are. This one is going to be modify color to current. This one is going to be modify layer to current. Okay, so if we want to change the color of our geometry, we window pick it. So it's highlighted now, and you can use this miscellaneous toolbox. Now, this one here is to modify the color to current, or the current color. So your color bar is right down here. You can pick any color that you want, or even another color. I'm just going to pick this light blue color. So that's now my current color. I'll click modify color to current, and then now those holes are now the light blue. Okay, if I want to change them to a different color, I can highlight it. I can change what color I want them to go to. I hit modify color to current. Now they're changed to a different color. This process is the same for layers, okay? The software only comes with one default layer, which is the CAD layer. So if you want to move geometry to a new layer, you have to create a new layer first. To create a new layer, you right click in this window, you go add new layer. You give the layer name or not named, okay? If you put the checkbox on it, that makes it the active layer. If you click the black dot, that turns the visibility of that layer on and off. Okay, so if I want to move these holes, let's say I rename this, and this is holes. And I'm going to slow that down. To rename it, I right click on the layer. I go to rename layer, and then I name it. So this is holes, okay? From here, I'm going to window pick my hole geometry. And then I'm going to click this button right here, modify layer to current. And that will move the geometry over to that layer. If I turn off the visibility of the CAD layer, you can now see that the holes are black and they're on a layer called holes. Now, the other thing that you can do now that you have the holes are black and the holes are on a layer called holes is when you go to selection, now you're going to have access to pick by color. And this will show all the different colors that are available. Or you're going to have access to pick by layer. And this will show the different layers that are available. So those are quick ways to select groups of geometry, and you can group them by color, and you can also group them by layer, okay? All right, so we talked about changing the color, we talked about changing the layer. What if we want to change this radius size, okay? That's another option you can do. You select it, and if you look here, you'll see this one is modify or entity modification. This works for single entities, lines and arcs, okay? So click on this arc here. This gives me all the information about the arc. If I want to make the hole size bigger, I can change the radius. If I want to change where it's located, I could say here, I want it to be located there, or whatever the value is, okay? So that's how you modify single entities. You select it, go to selection mode, select it, go to entity modify, okay? All the attributes of that entity will come up and you can modify them. Now, you're not limited to the miscellaneous toolbar. If you select geometry, you can right click and you also have modify attributes, color, line style, layer, point style. You also have modify to current color, line style, layer, or point style, okay? And then you also have your entity modify in here as well. So whether you're going from the toolbar or going from the right mouse menu, you're going to get those same options, okay? So we talked about modifying the color, modifying the layer, modifying the geometry, a single entity. The other thing we would talk about is line style. If we select these two entities here, these two lines, and I go to line style, I can go from solid to dotted, or I could reselect them and I can go from dotted to solid. The reason why we do that is when you're doing pocketing, you have open pocketing, and open pocketing is defined by a dotted line. So the dotted lines represent the open area of the pocket. So that's why we use that, all right? So hopefully that answers all the questions there. Russ, I know you have a question about trimming. I'll get to that in just a minute. Steve, we answered on turning layers on and off, and how to move geometry. If there are any questions about this topic, go ahead and submit them. Otherwise, we're going to move to the next one. Again, this is changing attributes of geometry. All right, looks like we're going to move on to the next topic. All right, so now that you have some geometry on the screen, this is whether you've imported it or whether you've drawn it, you may want to measure it or inspect it. So there's two real methods to do this. One is to use measure 1 and measure 2. The other is to create dimensions. Now, measure 1 and measure 2 happens to be found on this miscellaneous toolbar, and you see a little rule. This one's for a single entity, and this one's for 2 entities, okay? The other method would be to go to dimensions and use the dimension menu like you're creating an inspection report or a print. This option here, you're going to click on something and it's going to measure it, and the information about that entity is going to stay populated in that window until you measure something else, okay? It will stay populated in that window whether you're in the toolpath wizard, even if you're in another drawing, it stays here until you measure something else, which is actually extremely useful, okay? If you use the dimensions function, if you go to dimension and let's say horizontal, this is going to give you tolerances and arrows and pre and post text, so more for like printmaking or inspection reports, you know, more like a markup tool, okay? So if we go from here to here, we're going to see a dimension is placed on the drawing, and that dimension is going to stay there until you delete it, or, you know, generally I'll put these on a different layer, okay? So that's kind of the difference. This one here, when I go to measure 1 and I click on an entity, the information about it is populated in this window. When I create a dimension, it stays on the screen, okay? There is a question that came in, changing the arcs or radii, are you able to modify multiple entities with that single entity button? Ruben, I don't believe so. As far as I know, modify entity, like if I have this radius here and I go modify, that's going to modify 1. As soon as I select multiple entities, okay, it no longer becomes available. Okay, Ruben, so modify entity or entity modification is for 1 entity. Now, you know, when it comes to holes, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. If I needed to redraw all these holes here, what I would probably do is go to point, arc center, and I would window pick, shift window pick, spacebar. That gives me points on the arc center of all of them. And then I would go here, arc, snap, and then I would change whatever the radius needed to be. So I would just go in here and click and click. I mean, I guess there's another way to do that. Let me see here. So I could snap them all through, or what's the one that I'm thinking here? Because I'm pretty sure I can snap. Let me go arc snap. Yeah, I can do another window. So if I turn all that off, I can shift and select all those points, and then I can grab them all in one time. So you can't modify an arc or a line or multiple ones. Modify entity is for a single entity, but you can snap points to all the arc centers and then snap arcs to all the point centers. So that's a way that you can get around that. So hopefully that answers that question. Can you measure the 8 inches dimension showing the entity, using the entity measure? Yes, Brian, absolutely. So you have the two options here. You have the measure. We have the measure, and then we have dimension. So when we do measure 1, that's a single entity, so you only get 1 entity at a time, right? Okay, whether it's the line or the arc. And what I say you use this for is really for like inspecting. You're inspecting the geometry. You imported something, you've drawn something. You don't really need a whole dimension. You just kind of want to grab some information off of that geometry. So measure 1 is for 1. Measure 2 will give you 2 entities, so you can go from here to here, and you can see the distance is 8, or you can go from here to here, and the distance is 1/4 inch. So this will help you with widths and slots and everything else. Now, I want to preface that these, both the Measure 1 and Measure 2 and the dimension tools are based off a wireframe. Okay, these are wireframe tools. If you have surfaces or solids, you have to convert edges first, or what we call extract edges. Okay, it's one of the 35 editing tools here. You have extract edges single. If you're working with a solid and you want to pull dimensions, you got to convert to wireframe first. Once you have the wireframe, then you can measure. Another thing to understand as well is this is for measuring geometry that's flat in the XY plane. Okay, so we're drawing in a plane right now. If you look at the UCS, this is the plane, the top plane. Okay, so if I measure between here and here on inspect, right? So I go here and here, I'm going to get a dimension of 6 3/4. If I take this line here and let me move it up in Z, some random value, okay, and then I measure from here to here, what do you think I'm going to get? I'm not going to get the XY dimension, I'm going to get the XYZ dimension. Okay, so that's very important. If the geometry is flat in the plane, when you measure between 2 entities, you get the XY. If the geometry is not on the same Z level, or not flat in a plane, then you're going to get the XYZ dimension. Okay, so that's really important to understand when you're inspecting your geometry or measuring your geometry. So we talked about Measure 1, single entity. We talked about Measure 2. Now, one of the things that I want to bring up real quick, if I do Measure 2, I'm going to get the center to center distance. So if I measure 2 arcs, if I click on these 2 arcs, I'm going to get center to center. Now, what happens if I want to measure inside to inside, outside to outside, outside to inside, or some other dimension from center to center for 2 arcs? Well, the way that you would do that is with the dimension tools, and you're going to use snap points. Okay, so I'm going to do dimension horizontal, and this time instead of just clicking on the arc, I want to be selective of where I'm going to click on the arc. So I hold down Shift, one of your keyboard tools, so Shift, left click on the arc, and then you get all your snap points. From there you can click on the point you want to measure off of, and then Shift, left click, and then you can grab another snap point. Now, you do get snap points from surface edges and solids, so you can use them for translations. You just don't get all the snap points for like a circle because you don't really have a circle. You have like a spline, so it has 1 point for circles, okay? So you can see I can measure. If I go from here to here, I can get this value, or I could go outside to outside, or what have you. All right, so again, this is for geometry that's flat in the XY plane. Okay, you can do things like, if you want to figure out what this angle is, you know, you can go here to here, you know, and depending on, you know, where you're at, sometimes you draw witness lines to get different angles to work off of, so you can figure things out. But yeah, you got your dimensioning tools, you have your inspection tools, and you have your dimensioning tools, and that's how you use your snap points as well. All right, let's see here. What if you want to go from the top to the left line to the bottom of the right line, point to point? If you want to measure point to point, you can pick 2 points. If you, you know, one of the tools that I use here is I have a dimension point, so I can grab this point here, and I can grab that point there, and then that way I know relative to 0 where this point is and where that point is. Okay, if you want to do in a single entity, you could do line join, and you can go here to here, and then you can measure this line right here, and that will give you a corner to corner dimension, you know, the total length. Okay, so those are just some different tools that you can use, Russ. Hopefully that answers your questions there. All right, if there's any other topics about measure or dimensions, go ahead and ask now. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next topic. All right, looks like we're good. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the UCS, or the User Coordinate System. Sometimes it's called the WCS. world coordinate system. This is sometimes it's called a plane. The plane that you're drawing on, the XY, the YZ, the ZX, okay? So by default, BobCAD is in a plane. Some other CAD systems you may be familiar with, you have to pick a plane before you can draw. With BobCAD, you're in a plane by default, okay? You're in the top plane. Now, if you go under preferences, there's some customization you can do, things you can turn on and off. Defaults will set the default for future files that you create. Settings part just adjusts the part settings that you're working on. So in this case, I want to go to settings part because I don't want to adjust my default. I just want to change some settings while I'm working in this file. Okay, so one of the things I'll do is I'll change plain display color to orange, and I'll turn the transparency down. I'll click OK. So when you're in a top view, we do not display the plane. Okay, so the assumption is in a top view, you don't need to see the plane. Okay. Now, if I rotate the file and you click on the front view, all of a sudden you're going to see the plane that you're drawing on. So this is the plane, you know, the XZ plane that we're drawing on. Or if you go to a side view, you have a different plane. So how does this work? Well, all right, so if I'm drawing and I draw a rectangle, for instance, okay, so that's the rectangle that I want to draw. Well, if I'm in the top plane, it draws it in the XY. If I'm in the front plane, it shifts it to the XZ. If I'm in the side plane, it shifts it to the YZ. So this allows you to draw on different sides or orientations of your part. And when it comes to 3D design, this is pretty important. It actually makes 3D design really easy because most people have drawn from a top view in the past. Okay, they have some experience with drawing from a top view. So when you start doing extrusions and you want to cut away from your models, you just go to a different plane, draw in 2D, extrude, and that's how you can get some really complex geometry very simply. Okay, so the user coordinate system, or UCS, controls the plane that you're drawing in. Now, it actually serves it's used for more than just that. You can use it to set the plane that you're drawing in, but you can also use a user coordinate system for an index. You can use it for a machine setup location. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that you can use a user coordinate system. Now, in this example, I'm going to get into some solids. BobCAD does have surfaces and solids, okay? So I'm going to take this shape here, and I'm going to just create a new layer. Like I said, I get kind of layer crazy, but I'll just create a new layer. I'm going to go to the surface menu, and these are all the different surface types that we have. There's a bunch in here. I didn't count them, so I can't tell you the number off the top of my head, but there's a bunch. We're going to go to extrude curve. Extrude curve allows us to take a wireframe and extrude it as a solid. So we'll do extrude curve. We're going to hold down shift. We're going to select our profile. We're going to hit spacebar, and then this will give us the ability to pull this shape up or down. Okay, so I'm changing the height of it. Now I have two sides. I can change it on the top. I can change it on the bottom. You will notice that it kind of snaps on the screen. There is a snap grid, so you can, it's a bunch of points that are drawn in the background. Sets like an increment. So this we can draw and we can add some thickness, or you can come over here and enter in the values as well. All right, so we're going to go like this, and we have this shape here. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a chamfer on this edge. So I'm going to break this edge right here. All right. If I want to draw on this plane here, how am I going to do that? All right. Well, it's easy. We're going to create a plane to draw there. We're going to create a user coordinate system to draw there. So how do you do that? Well, in the user coordinate system, you can right click and it gives you some options. Add a new UCS, active UCS, rename, modify, delete. Okay, so these are your options. We're going to go add new UCS. And when you go to add new UCS, you get a bunch of options. You have snap, you have 3-point, you have move, you have rotate, planar face, and cylindrical face. Okay, so let me turn, before I do anything here, let me turn my coordinate system on. I have it, the display of it turned off because I generally don't like to see it unless I have to. Okay, let me delete this coordinate system here. All right, and let's do this again. So I have this solid here. This is the world 0 or the 0 that we're in, okay? From here, what we're going to do is right-click. We're going to do Add New UCS. We have a couple of different options. So the first one is Snap. So if I choose Snap, I can pick any edge, right? So I can pick an edge here, and you'll see that it will snap to the nearest endpoint, okay? So that's one way that you can, you know, create a coordinate system to draw on an area of your part. I can come over here to this. Once I have one created, I can come over and I can choose Modify, and I'll choose Snap again. Maybe I want it to be that corner, okay? So now, this is the 0 of the drawing. So anything that I draw, like let's say I do solids and then cylinder, that cylinder is based off of that 0 location, okay? So let's say I come back and I modify this. So I right-click, modify UCS, snap, let's say I make it this corner over here, okay? So that becomes the 0 for the drawing, okay? So now when I go to do a solid, let's say I do a cylinder, you can see it's from that 0. So snap is one way to do it. Snap will pick up endpoints, and you can snap a coordinate system to anywhere on your drawing. All right. Another thing you can do here, let's go ahead and modify this one. You have a 3-point method. A 3-point method is like a 3-edge method, except we're using endpoints, and you're describing the X direction, then the Y direction, and then the Z direction. Okay. An example of a 3-point here would be if I wanted 0 to be right on this corner, and I wanted this axis to be the X-axis, and I wanted this axis to be the Y-axis. 3 points. That one's the first point. That's the Z. That one's the second point for X, and that one's the third point for Y. So you can see we have X, Y, and Z going in that direction. I think I misspoke when I first talked, when I was first describing the 3-point method. So you have 3 points. The first is the 0 or the Z, Z position. I guess it's not really the Z, it's the 0. One is for the X direction, one is for the Y direction. Okay, so that's the 3-point method. Another option that you have here is once you get, you have a plane method as well. So let's go ahead and let's modify this. So we'll go modify UCS, we'll do planar face. This time I'm going to pick this face here, and you can see that I've drawn, now I'm drawing on this face of the part. So you can change where you're drawing on the part. Extremely useful tool. And again, you can use a user coordinate system for a setup location. You can use it for an index system as well. All right. Now let's say you have one like this. When I clicked on this plane here, you can see X and Y are going that way, and I may not want X or Y to go that way. So another thing you can do, you'll notice I'll cancel out of the UCS first, I'll come back over, and then I'll modify it. I can do a rotate. So this one, I'm going to do an absolute rotate, and this rotate is going to be along X. We're going to say minus, now is it X? It's along Y. We're going to say minus 90. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Let me undo that. What do I want here? Let me go back, modify. I don't know what happened. I lost them. Let me delete it. All right, let's do this again. We're gonna modify a UCS. I'm not sure what happened there. It's okay. We're gonna add a new UCS. Okay. Let me get rid of the rotate and let's go to the planar face. I'm gonna pick this surface right here. Okay, so we're in the same scenario. This is the one that I usually show. We're in the same scenario. X is going this way. I want X running parallel. If I choose the 3-point, then I'm setting the X and Y direction at that time. In this case, I want to right-click to, I want to cancel out of the UCS creation. Then I want to go to modify. This one's going to be rotate. This is going to be Z minus 90. And I think, I don't know, I'm making mistakes here. Sorry, guys. Let me delete this. Let's do it again. All right. Add new UCS, planar face. Pick this face right here. Okay. Cancel out of that. We're going to do modify UCS, rotate. I think it's because I set that absolute there. We're going to do minus 90, and there we go. All right. So I believe, and I apparently have not clicked that button before, but I believe absolute is in reference to the world coordinate system, or the top UCS. So that was what was messing me up there. So when I unchecked the absolute, it wasn't referencing it that way, and I was able to get it to rotate the way that I wanted. Okay, so we're going to do another one here. We'll do add new UCS. We're going to do planar face. We're going to pick this face here. Again, this is the face that we were working on. I'll cancel out of that window, come over to this one, modify UCS, rotate. This one we're going to say, we can just say 180. That should get it going, so X is running that way. All right, so that's how you can modify a UCS. All right, I'm probably spending too much time on this one. So we have standard planes. We have top, front, and side. We get that. We did creating different ways to create a UCS, so we did that as well. The only other thing that I want to talk about is sometimes you have like this plane is on this angle here, and a lot of times you want to look straight down on that plane. So you can do Control 8 and then active UCS, and now you can look down on that plane like it's a top view. So that's a pretty useful feature there. Or you can grab it from here, normal to your user coordinate system. All right. So we got that done. So are there any questions about the plane selection? If there is, go ahead and raise your hand. Robert, stymied after hours of study. Well, hopefully I've cleared that up for you. Does it make sense now how this user coordinate system works and how you can use it? I hope so, because utilizing it really makes a big difference in the way that you draw parts and what you do and what you don't have to do. So hopefully that was helpful for you. If there's anything else on that subject, what we're going to do is jump over to editing geometry. And this is probably one of the more common. I was concerned about cutting slots. Can you show us how to extend a diagonal line? All right. So we're going to go into editing geometry at this point. This is what we're going to focus on. So let me get rid of my solid here. So you're just going to undo it. Okay. We're going to talk about moving geometry, okay? So that's the first thing we want to talk about. If we go to utilities, this is where all of your editing tools are found, okay? So if we go utilities and translate, translate is our word for move. A couple of options here. So in these options here, we're going to go ahead and select our geometry. From selecting our geometry, we're going to hit spacebar to lock in our selection. Now at this point, you're in a delta move. Whether you choose to use the dynamic drawing handles and drag it in a distance, or if you just tell it move 5 inches in X, you're in a delta move from here, okay? So that's really important to understand. And actually, I'm going to do a little housekeeping here before I continue on with the editing. We want to talk about move, rotate, trim, deform, stretch, 2D boolean, and drag corner. Before we do that, I want to take some quick polls because I just want to get an idea of where everybody is at. So the first one I'm going to run here is, what version of the BobCAD software are you running? I want to get an idea so I understand what topics to really hone in on this level. We'll keep this poll open for just a minute longer. And it looks like the vast majority of people are running on the version 29, which is really good. We do have some 21 users out there and some 26 users and older. Just a couple of 27s, you know, some 28s, but mainly 29 users, and that is really good. I'm happy to see that. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll down in just one moment. Seeing the last final votes here. All right, looks good. It looks like pretty much everybody is running 29. There's about 30, about 30% that are not running 29. So that's good. If you guys aren't running 29, you know, I definitely recommend it. I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you everybody for participating in that poll there. Okay, the next one that I'm going to ask here is how long have you been using BobCAD? Want to launch this real quick. Let's get everybody to participate real quick so we can get through this. The goal here is really to find out the level of users, whether you're new users or you've been with the system for some time. You know, and it's always surprising to me to see the groups of people that are in here. It looks like we're split 50, well, actually a little bit more users than long-time users. There's a lot of long-time users that are in here, but a lot of users are fresh users. So it's great to see you. See you in here. There's lots of resources. These webinars are great. The BobCAD After Dark, the Facebook groups that are out there with us. So you guys definitely want to pick up this information and really use it so you have the best user experience. But yeah, it's great to see lots and lots of new users. So thank you everybody for participating in this poll. I'm going to close it now. All right, let's see the next one here. Are you on an active support plan? This is probably one of my, this is a fun one as well to see who is on support and who is not on support. You know, support is really important for you guys, so if you want to get a hold of somebody like me or Daryl or Mike or, I mean, there's so many guys down there, Walter, you know, if you want to talk to some of our top techs, you really need to be on a support plan. If you're not on a support plan, I highly recommend you get on one. It looks like most of you are, which is great to hear. If you're not sure about the support plan, you guys can always talk to your account managers and they'll tell you. And it's okay if you're not sure, but you definitely, we like you guys to be on support so we can help you best. So if you're not on a support plan, call us today, get signed up, you know. All right, we're going to close this poll out in just a second here. And all right, it's closed. All right, let's see. I am going to switch over to some CAD questions here, if you guys don't mind. What CAD files does your shop use most? Are you guys mainly dealing with wireframe geometry? Are you dealing with surface files? Do you work with SolidWorks files? You know, what's most common for your shop? What are you guys working with, you know? Really over the last 10 years, there's been a huge shift from more paper drawings and wireframe to surfaces and solids. You know, so it's always good to get an idea here of what kind of files you guys are using most. And I think even though the shift to solids is pretty predominant in the market, I see a lot of wireframe users here, which is great because this particular webinar has a lot to do with wireframe. So hopefully this is helping you guys out. I'll give the poll just a little while longer. We do see a lot of SolidWorks guys in here as well, so it's good to see that too. All right, so let's close this one out. All right, I'm going to do this question here. Do you import and edit or do you draw parts from scratch? Okay, so are you importing files or are you drawing parts from scratch? Or are you doing both? Okay, so that's another really good question. Just kind of get an idea, and it looks like a lot of people are using BobCAD for drawing. A lot more for drawing from scratch than I expected. So that was great to see. But the majority of people are doing both, and I think that is the most common. We'll let this poll run just a moment longer. And all right, we're going to go ahead and close this one out. Thank you everybody for participating. All right, so this one's for fun. This is for me, okay? So hopefully you guys have a sense of humor because it's kind of fun. All right, what do you like most about BobCAD? Okay, here we go. Is it ease of use? Is it the bang for the buck? Is it your account manager, the support team, or my personal favorite? The cat logo is really cool and I love cats, okay? I don't know. Me personally, I do have a cat and a dog. My cat kind of looks like the BobCAD logo. Panther cat is the logo, but just kind of seeing where you guys are at here. I really appreciate everybody coming out here today. I know we scheduled these for an hour. I tend to run long. I can't help it. There's just a lot to talk about, and I really like seeing everybody in here. It looks like some new people I'm not familiar with, so really appreciate you guys spending time out of your day to share with me. I hope you come back next week as well. I do see some people jump off probably right at lunchtime or what have you, but all right, very good. The voting's in, and the bang for the buck was the winner. But I did get a nice group of people that like the cat logo because it's really cool. So thank you guys so much for voting there. Let's go ahead and close these polls down. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to cover. I'm going to cover training again real quick. I'll launch this one. This will be the last poll before we get back into the subject matter. What kind of training do you guys like most? Okay, what works best for you? Video training, online training, screen share, training seminars, books, and tutorials. I know personally, I create a lot of videos. I watch a lot of videos. That's where I pick up a lot of information. I find hands-on really helps me quite a bit as well. So just kind of getting an idea of what works best for you guys, what you like most. The training seminars I know are very popular as well. A lot of people like classroom learning with a group of peers. We do have seminars all over the country. So again, just trying to get an idea of what you guys like most. It's important. I need to know. So thank you guys so much for voting here today. We're going to close this poll down. All right. There we go. Okay, so now let's get back to business. So we're talking about editing geometry here. So what are we going to do here? So we got this part. We have some shapes here. So there's a couple of things. Let me translate. You know, let's see. Does anybody have any questions about translate, how to move geometry? Go ahead and raise your hand. I know there's a couple of things that are different with Translate over the last few versions. If you go to Translate and you window pick your geometry, you are in a delta mode. So any value that you enter here, the part will move incrementally from where it is. Okay. The other thing we have here is when you drag, you can pull on these drag handles. If it's the red one, it's along X. If it's the green one, it's along Y. And then if it's the dot in the center, it's along X and Y. And again, you do see it snapping to the snap point grid that is set up in the background, okay? If you add a copy and you enter a number of copies and you drag this out on the screen, it will show those copies so you can see your layout. A common method of moving would be moving by points. So utilities translate, and we'll go to sketch enter. You can pick or enter a start and pick or enter an end. We want this whole center to go to 0, so we're going to pick that as our start, and we've entered our end position. Window pick, spacebar, shift, left click on the circle to get our snap points, the one in the center. That moves it over. Now really any point that we pick at this point will move that to 0. Okay, the midpoint, the end point. So that's just a little bit about translate there. Okay, let's see. The other one that we have is rotate. This is very common as well. Utilities rotate, window pick, spacebar. One of the things that I like about rotate is you now have your rotate center as a draggable object, so you can move it around. Okay, so you can set where your rotation point's going to be, and then how much you want to rotate around, and then you can enter what the rotation value is. I actually find this very useful when drawing angles and things like that. Instead of doing line angle, I may have a line here, and I may decide, okay, well I want to change this angle, so I'll use rotate, select it, snap this to the end of this line here, and then now I can set what that rotation angle is. I find myself using that quite a bit and as a very useful feature. So that's a little bit about translate, a little bit about rotate. If there's any questions about that, go ahead and ask it now. All right, let's see what else we have. I know if Brian is still with us here. Brian Murphy, are you still here? Or should I just say Brian? You are still here. All right, Brian, you got a microphone? Let's see. Are you there, Brian?
Yeah, no. No, mic's not working.
But I can hear you. I can hear you right now. So can everybody else. Say hello.
Hello.
Very good. All right. So you had, I'm sorry, I know you had that question a little while back. You were talking about how to extend a diagonal line. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it Go ahead.
Let's say that diagonal line that you've got two diagonal lines there running at an angle. If I want to push the left-hand one up, say an inch.
Okay, so when your trim options, okay, one of the ones you can use is trim screen, and you can click on this and you can trim it out, okay? The problem with that is I'm not setting this up an inch. Like I can't tell it to go an inch up off of that line, right? If I go to modify entity, let's say I click on that line and I go to modify entity, it doesn't give me a length to adjust, okay? So the way that I would handle this, if I wanted it to go an inch up, is I would do a parallel line from here, from 1 inch. So I'll go from here up, and then I'll trim the single entity from there to there. So that gets me an inch up. Does that make sense? Now,
yep,
the other thing you may say is, well, what if I want it to just be an inch along this direction, right? So that's a little more tricky. There's a couple of ways that you could do that. One of the ways that you could do that might be to create a coordinate system that's aligned with this angle here. Okay, so we go and add a UCS and let's snap it to the end of this shape here. Okay, so the thing is we want to figure out what the angle is for this to rotate down. I'm not sure what it is, so I'm going to trim this line out like this, and I'm going to measure between these two, and this is going to give me an angle of 25 degrees, right? Okay, so now I can take that UCS, I can modify it, I can say rotate Z 25 degrees, minus 50 degrees. Okay, so now I have this UCS along this line, okay? From here, I mean, there's a couple of ways to do it. I'm just going to do point coordinates, X minus 1, right? And that gives me 1 inch there, okay? I'll go back to my top view, so now I can trim this line from here to that point, and that is 1 inch along the line, okay?
Yep.
That was probably a lot to take in, but it is recorded, so you can play it back. But so again, using those coordinate systems can be pretty powerful. If you wanted it to be along an X, we can do a parallel line and trim to it. If we want it to be along that line, you got a little bit of work to do there. I know there is a request in to be able to click on an entity and change the length of it, so you won't have to go through the coordinate moves. But hopefully that answers that for you. Does it?
Yes. Al, have I got that trim on version 23?
You do have. You should. If you go to trim and extend. If you go to trim and extend, you should have trim screen is the one that you're looking for.
Okay, cool, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So keep coming back, Brian, and I'll talk to an account manager. Get updated to 29. You're killing me with this 23 stuff. That's like 10 years ago. But but anyways, I know you'll get up to speed, I'm sure. Thank you for participating today. I'm going to move on to the next topic. Thank you so much. All right, let's see here. So we did move, rotate, trim. I want to, there's a lot of things about trim that I can go over. There's a couple. We just talked about trim to screen. We're going to do something like this. Okay, so the trim, I have trim on my toolbar here. This is something that I use quite a bit. Trim to screen, again, this gives you the ability to pull the shape one way or another. So that's really useful for construction geometry and things like that. Trim one entity is where you're going to click from one, it trims one side at a time, okay? So if I do that again, I have two intersecting geometry. It may not even be intersecting, but they can intersect. I click on one to the other and it trims it. I click on the other to the other and it trims it. So that's trim one. It does one entity at a time. Trim two, I click on two entities and it trims it where it intersects, okay? There's also trim, I don't use trim modal often, but trim strings I use, and this is where you can walk around the part, okay? So you can go from here to here to here to here to there, and it trims it as it goes. So that's one that I use quite a bit. And quick trim, this is probably one of the more popular ones. This is for intersecting geometry. When you have intersecting geometry, you can just click on what you want to get rid of, okay? When you use trim 1 and trim 2, you lose one side or the other. When you use quick trim, you just click on what you delete. It's actually a really easy tool to use, and I definitely recommend that you get familiar with that. So that's a little bit about trim. The other one that I wanted to talk about, there's like 2D booleans in here. So let's do another example of this real quick. So we got this and we got that. Okay, so here we have a couple of shapes. What do we want to do? So you got the first group, mirror, rotate, rotate 3D, translate, trim and extend, and break. I don't really have enough time to get into all of the break functions, but breaks entities at different positions, and sometimes that can be helpful when you're doing fillets and things like that. Let's see, but what I want to cover is 2D booleans real quick. So I'm going to do 2D booleans. I'm going to do subtract. This is the shape that I want to keep. Select spacebar. These are the shapes that I want to cut away. Select spacebar, and then I'm able to cut that away. So that's another trim option for you. Is 2D boolean, just like 3D booleans, except for it's with wireframe. So that's a very useful feature. Some of the other ones too for like artwork and things are deform. You can click on an arc and be able to pull things out like this. That's also a very useful feature. They did add fillet chains. Is new to 29, so you can. It's got to have enough room to fit, but you can chain select that and put the fillets all the way around. So that's another useful feature there. Let's see here. 2D boolean, drag corner. When you're working with splines, but here, let me get rid of this. I want to talk about stretch for 2D geometry. And then once I'm done with stretch, I'm probably going to end off there. I may do a round 2 on this, but we'll see. So I want to talk about stretch. Stretch allows you to change your geometry. So this is really useful. We're going to do drag, horizontal, vertical, and multiple entities. And this is where you have some geometry and you want to change the width of the slots. Maybe you want to change this cutout. You can pull this in different directions. So it allows you to modify your geometry, stretching the geometry without having to do, line parallel and then trim it. So stretch is actually a really useful feature that's been added to the software in the last couple of versions. Okay, you 29 guys, you're lucky because it all comes with it right out of the box. Okay, so we did move a little bit, rotate, trim, deform, stretch, 2D boolean. The other one is drag corner, utilities, drag corner. A lot of times I'm using these features for more artistic type work. I want to change something up. I want to do a logo or a little irregular shape, something that isn't so mechanical in nature. Okay, so a question came in from somebody, how do you pick the UCS? You pick the UCS just by putting the checkbox on it. And whatever checkbox you're on is the active UCS that you'll be drawing with. So hopefully that answers your question there. Click, angle 0, length 1, end, click, end of line. Hey, Michael, that's actually a great comment here. As far as the method to draw, to extend out the line. So there's always more than one way to do things. So it's always great to see the feedback from the different users. Michael suggested doing a line angle, and having this, let's see, relative to, let's make it 0. So relative to to the line and then at the desired value. It's actually a really good point. So if you want to extend the line by some amount, you can do line angle like that. Now you do get two entities here. You have one entity for the extension, and then you have another entity for the line. And what you can do with that is you can clean up and optimize, reorganize, clean up and optimize, and this should take these two entities and make them one entity. So that's actually a great great tip there, Michael. Thank you so much for that one. What's the easiest way to connect two lines? So you have one line here, and then you have line parallel, I think is what Brian's asking. Let's say you have two lines, horizontal and vertical, but not touching. Okay, so that's not what you're saying. So you got one going here, and you have one going here, right? And you want to connect these two lines. Trim two, boom, boom. That's the best way to connect them. The fastest and the easiest way to connect them. So thank you. Hopefully that answers your question there, Brian. All right, so I think I'm going to taper off here. Unless there are any additional questions that you guys have. I got through most of the material. I didn't get into some of the solid functions that I wanted to show and the CAD history tree for solid modeling. But we may need to pick that up either in a one-on-one demo. You know, you can call in and get a one-on-one demo, or maybe in one of the next webinars. Let's see. Can you, Mike has a question, can you change the default command that is called when you click the menu item that has a drop down? From here, are you asking, Mike? Can you change what these are? Or are you, oh no, you're saying when it's here, how do you set what the default is? I do not believe you can set what the default is for the drop down. Same thing with like the point menu. Let's see, let's go to CAD, like these. This, I think you're asking what default option is there, and as far as I know, you do not have the ability to change the drop-down menu, the default drop-down. So that's a great question. That might make a good feature request, which brings up a really good segue. As you guys know, the development of the software is 100% by from feedback from customers like you. So any things that you want to see in the software, you got to let us know about it. If you go to our website, BobCAD.com, all the way down at the bottom, there's a section that says report issue or feature requests. You can report issues you may be having with the software, or you can report feature requests, things you'd like to see in the software. And you know, it's like a vote, and the more votes that we get for different things, that's actually what we have incorporated into the software. All right, is there any other questions here before we wrap up? Again, I appreciate everybody coming out here today. I'm trying to get the webinar within the hour. I guess I like to talk a whole lot. You guys are a lot of fun to work with, a lot of really good questions, and you know, different points of view. Even I learned something here today. So it's great that you guys are spending time with me here today. If you have any other questions before I wrap up here, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, we're gonna taper off. Okay, guys? So I'll give it just a second to see if anybody has anything else they've come up with. Does BobCAD do remote? I'm not sure what you mean by remote, like maybe a remote login. I assume if you have BobCAD installed on a server that it's running on and you can remote into that server, then you could use BobCAD by remoting into that server. But I think what you're asking, Charlie, is a network license where you can have a network license to allow multiple users to run off of access to licenses off the server, and that is not currently available, but will be released here shortly. Network licensing is coming soon, very soon. It's actually being tested on a couple of locations, and will be broken out from there for other people to use. So if you want more information about the network license, Charlie, just speak with your account manager, and they'll get you on the list for that. Ryan has a question. Import I think he's saying CATIA models into BobCAD. The file translators that come are standard translators, DXFI, JustStep, ACES, Parasolids, SAT, what do we got? Rhino, SolidWorks, STEP, and STL. Those are all the standard translators. That is what comes with the software. And so if you're coming from CATIA or Pro Engineer or any other system, you're going to look for those neutral file formats. So hopefully that answers your question there, Ryan. CAM system. I just did a 3D boot camp. I'm not sure how to say your name, but Mr. Reyes, I just did a 3D boot camp, so you can watch that. I did 2 versions of it, so that's available, and then there'll be also more CAM videos as well. So stay subscribed to us, sign up for the webinars when they become available, and you'll be able to learn more about the CAM side of the software. Another really good way to learn about the CAM side of the software is with a one-on-one demonstration. So that is always available for you as well. So, you know, if you want to get a one-on-one demonstration, you can always call us, 877-262-2231, extension 123. You can also download a demo. You can sign up for a one-on-one demonstration right on the website. Okay, so call us, download, get in contact, and we'll take care of you with that. Are your webinars posted on the support site? Replay afterwards. And John, anybody who signs up for the webinar will get an email link for today's webinar. So if you're signed up today, you're going to get an email link to watch the software. I think it's hosted on YouTube. So that way you can replay this and watch it over and over again. So any webinar, if you're not able to make it, you know, we'd love for you to be here for the live Q&A, but if you're not able to make it, it's okay. You will get an email of the webinar so you can watch it at a later date. Okay, John, so hopefully that answers your question there. Brian, great to see you here. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Mark, yep, see you next week. That sounds great. James, if you didn't get the webinar link last week, we may have the wrong email address for you. Just email me, al@bobcad.com, and just let me know what's going on, and I'll send you over the link to make sure that you have it. Arto, yep, thank you for participating here today. Thank you, everybody, for spending some time with me. It was a fun webinar for basics for CAD, so thank you so much for showing up. You guys, if you have any additional questions about CAD, you can always give me, you can email me, al@bobcad, real simple, al@bobcad.com. You can find me on Instagram, @al_DePoalo. You can find me on Facebook, BobCAD After Dark. YouTube, if you search BobCAD on YouTube, it's hard not to find me. So let's connect, and any questions that you have, any other topics that you want to cover, just let me know. It'd be great to work with you one-on-one. Nate, I'm not sure where the list of webinars are. If you email me, al@bobcad, I'll make sure to send you a list of the webinars so you have them to review. This way you can watch additional webinars that we've done on different topics. We do these on a semi-regular basis, and recently we've been doing them a little more regular, and I think you can expect that for the coming weeks. So yeah, no problem. All right, guys, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.